In 2002, 2003, there was a bipartisan consensus that one, Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Across the political spectrum, from the Brookings Institute to AEI, you could hear people saying and making that argument, and that the war to overthrow Saddam Hussein would be relatively painless. In 2006, 2007, you could hear elites from across the political spectrum argue that there was no major problem in the American financial sector and that our economy was fundamentally healthy. In 2016, and I know this because I did a lot of TV then, you could hear elites from across the political spectrum say there is no way that Donald Trump will win the presidential election. Hillary Clinton is going to be president in January of 2017. And on all of those issues, I mean, the first two with catastrophic consequences, the elite opinion makers were fundamentally wrong. What they thought was true was not actually true. And I do think that there is sometimes a herd mentality that sets in among everybody. I'm no fan of fake news. I'm no fan of the various rumor mills that start, complete lies on Facebook and drive people insane. I think that it's really bad for our democracy. But I think part of recognizing that people don't trust the mainstream media is to recognize that sometimes the mainstream media hasn't been totally right. The one final point I'll make on this is that the current cover of Time magazine has a child on it that was pitched as a person who was separated from their children, or pitched as a person who was separated from their parents at the Mexican border. It turns out that that person, the child, that crying child who's looking up at President Trump on the cover of Time magazine, that child actually was not separated from her mother. She was reunited with her mother, and she's currently with her mother right now. That creates a sense of skepticism of mainstream institutions. So I'll all the time push on people not to take such a skeptical posture, not to assume that everything they read on Facebook is true. But I also think it requires elites to actually rebuild trust in some of these institutions, and they haven't totally lost it for illegitimate reasons. Some of the reasons they've lost that sense of trust is totally legitimate.
Maybe I'll end, since I think our time is up. And my response goes back to this vocabulary thing. I think what we all, in response to your questions, just what we can do at an individual level is just maybe narrow in your own heart who the enemy is. Because we're all very us versus them, and I feel this way, and it's very personal. If somebody does something cruel to you or mean or terrible, I get extremely angry, and it's very easy to just feel angry at the whole group in some ways. So it's very human. And it's what I see because of cable news and Fox and both sides there are these huge terms now. So like social justice warrior. Okay, that's one that the right uses all the time. And I was talking to somebody, I was like, it's like this gargantuan category, and they have in their head an image of somebody screaming on Fox News. But I have students, I was like, here's somebody that you would call a social justice warrior, a Yale law student who worked quietly for 3 years, and the team just freed a person who had been improperly imprisoned for 30 years on a DNA test. See, I think this is an idea of whether you're Republican or Democrat, everybody likes that, right? I mean, that's a great act of justice that people fought, and that was a social justice warrior. And I think on the other side too, I see among my left-wing students, it's like the Trump voter. I mean, this gigantic category of bigoted, misogynist, racist, and it's just 60, to assign these, I've been studying discrimination and prejudice and ethnic conflict for 20 years, mostly in other countries, but that actually is the definition of prejudice, when you assign these gigantic characteristics to huge numbers of faceless people that you've never met. So anyway, I guess, is there a way to end on a more optimistic note?
The optimistic note is that this was a great conversation, and hopefully we can have many more over the coming days.
Thank you all for coming.